Okay, the timer has been started. 5 minutes on the clock. The book is Color of Law. I have my notes, I have my brain, and I've highlighted pages. Let's get to it. I'm going to do a basic 5-minute review. Going to do a more lengthy review, discussion, education, presentation about this book and the details that are in it. But for now, I just finished this book. I literally sat down, read this book today, the entire book, and none of it really surprises me, unfortunately. This comes from a perspective of someone who's only known the United States history from, or to a point, when up until 16, I probably only knew of U.S. history or international history or world history, whatever you want to call it, from the lens of government-approved, school-sanctioned, school-produced books and textbooks. That's not always the full truth. So I read a book. I want you to read a book. For anyone who has been interested in politics, racial segregation, political issues regarding race, any of that, highly, highly recommended you read this. Even if you don't believe it. If you believe segregation and racial issues and all that kind of is a fallacy, and we have no responsibilities or anything, or no concern for it, I highly doubt you'll be watching this, but if you are, I challenge you. Read the book, Color of Law. I will buy you a copy, 100%. Seriously, we'll buy you a copy. And now that I spent a minute and a half trying to convince you to read a book, let me just tell you about what I think about the book. So, started off, it's basically a book that goes through the history of government policy post-Civil War and how it affects both the housing, education, achievement potential, lifestyle changes and factors and how that can affect things down the road of basically United States housing policy, how whites, African Americans, and other ethnic majorities aren't talked about explicitly, but they are mentioned in the book. Basically, it's about how white people and black people were put in different areas. It's just like, oh, black people go over there. Oh, white people go over there. And basically, the argument of the book is that there are two different kinds of segregation. De facto segregation and de jure segregation. De facto being like explicit, like, oh, you're black, you're going to go over there. Oh, you're white, you're going to go over there because of race and only because of race. De jure is more so like segregation is a product of other policies and actions and all the other governmental legal mumbo jumbo that can lead to certain minorities and certain ethnic groups being in one location over another. This book is really, really great in terms that it presents the argument. It gives what the author, Richard Rothstein, is putting out there. This is what he's claiming. This is trying to convince people of. It took him 10, 15, 20 years or something to write the book. He talked to a variety of people. He has a variety of experience on the subject. And basically just trying to get you to think, just like I'm trying to get you to think in certain ways. And by presenting an argument and by presenting the evidence along with that argument, I very much so believe that your views, if you don't think that American housing policy or government policies or anything since the Civil War have affected the situation going on now, the issues and the policies and just the racial divide going on now, if you don't think that that's affected, that's your belief. I'm not trying to push anything on anyone, but I challenge you to read it. Challenge you to learn some of the facts and the history and try to put it in your perspective of the world. Because I'm a 28-year-old man who has only lived through 28 years of the world. I was not a part of society. I was not in existence when schools were segregated. My mom and her sisters, they were a part of it. They lived in segregated schools. They lived in that whole world and environment. And that's not, but I lived. I didn't experience that. I don't have that understanding. So I read the book for the understanding of it. And to be honest with you, it's none of it was surprising, like I said, but it was definitely enlightening in terms of the details in which. Because it's not just like, oh, it's the government. No, it's not government. It's a series of coordinated efforts and actions by people both in the government and people outside of the government, by individual people that make up society. Because, certain people have preferences and do certain things, and just because certain people are racist doesn't mean that that's an unlawful thing. I mean, if they act on that racism and infringe upon someone else's rights as deemed by the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all that kind of stuff, then that is awful. And as I've gone over the 5-minute time, I'm okay with that. Sorry, I kind of tricked you. Ha! It's no longer a 5-minute book review. But really, if it infringes upon someone else, in my view, if it interferes with someone else's, sphere of influence, someone else's sphere of control, their bubble, and it did since World War II. I mean, since Civil War, World War I and World War II, there have been varied stages of growth and development for whites, and varied stages of growth and developments for black people. Black people, African American, whichever you prefer, names are interchangeable. They use the word Negro growing up, and this guy uses the word Negro all the time. That's probably one of the few times I've ever said in my life. He never uses the N-word, of course, because, he explains that. The N-word's off limits. Just one of the things that can just go to die. That argument can go to die. But yeah, Negro, colored, those were other terms that were used both in, and they're not great terms. They had some respect back then, but the level of respect as compared to now is not the same. They're not culturally accepted in the same way as African American is today. And while African Americans aren't all from Africa, and the term African American, like they're American, they're not African American, they're just American. But they're also black, like I'm white and I'm also Italian. So it's nomenclature is a big thing. But I'm a certain amount of politically correct, of course. But either way, African American, black, for me, interchangeable. If you don't like that, sorry. Tell me, feel free. But color of law, definitely. It goes through. So I'll just go through some of the basic notes that I've written down. Chapter 1 basically was just going through the difference between de facto and de jure. Started off with an example in San Francisco, and basically the whole book is like part of the argument, examples, talking about it. Part of the argument, examples, talking about it. And I think that's a great way to write a book. That's the way that I'm trying to write a book. So he goes into basically how the Public Housing Authority and these different agencies created from the New Deal and from other actions done after the Civil War have basically led to black ghettos. Black areas that are run down, that are, just not well maintained. And he goes through a lot of the reasons and factual experiences and like, oh, this is the policy, this is what it did, these are the people, these are the people that revolted and tried to prevent it from happening. Like here in Atlanta, Georgia, I live in Atlanta. There's history here that I don't know. This is history that I'm trying to learn. I have my District 2 map back here because I want to be a council member for District 2. But part of that process is getting to know the city more and getting to know what people in charge did here and how it led to what's going on now. A 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in an Atlanta City Council member meeting, virtually, thank you, YouTube. And one of the first guys that called in for public comment was just berating them about how, hey, do something about the zoning for black people. You know what you've done. You know what they've done. Fix it. And it's like, okay, obviously those council members did not do the zoning, but previous council members and previous congressmen and senators and governors and all that kind of stuff have done that. So as long as they have the understanding of it and they use that understanding in how they make new policies, new actions, I think that's the ultimate key. But besides the point, or rather getting ahead of myself, there's basically different, and I'll go through this in a further video. I'm going to get some inspiration from, what's his name? Zachary Harris, big YouTuber. What's his name? Johnny Harris, big inspiration from Johnny Harris. He has great YouTube videos that involve maps and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to try to get a map of all of this and give different examples and show it and all that kind of stuff. That'll take some time. But yeah, basically there's different government agencies that have done certain actions over time. And, some people have spoken up, some people try to prevent it. But honestly, there's a lot of individual people, individual actions that could have stopped it, that could have prevented it, could have resisted against it. Presidents could have done something different. Heads of different of these agencies could have done something different. NAACP could have done different things. Like individuals, communities, it's just incredible to really look back. And I would love to talk about this with anyone who's interested. I'm happy to have a conversation about it. Anyone who read this book, happy to have a conversation about it. Because public housing, ghettos, leading to that, the racial zoning, literally having certain certain categories of districts and areas that are zoned for black people or for white people or for low income or high income or all of these type things. And that's part of city planning, and there are certain actions that city officials have to do for city planning, whether or not it's industrial or commercial or mixed use or family, all that kind of stuff. Those are required things. But the way that it was done, like, it's pretty clear. Like, if you read the evidence, if you read, and I'm going to go and get another source for it. I'm going to go check all the references, go, cross-reference with other people. Like, but it's a pretty well documented thing. Certain policies can lead to certain actions and certain effects. So, without getting into specifics, like, or maybe I won't get into specific. Granted, this is way back to 1876, but in Hamburg, South Carolina, which is not that far from here, basically there was a bunch of murders right after the Civil War that killed a bunch of black people. And then the person who led the whole murdering spree, Benjamin Tillman, had a 24-year career as a senator in South Carolina. And then he still has like a statue and certain buildings named after him. But until that current, representative body in South Carolina changes that, it's still, and that's why people, they don't want to change history. But it's like, his statue should definitely be in a museum somewhere, honoring, or not honoring, but just like showing all the different actions and people that have led to our problems right now. Because there could have been very different policies from our government from post-Civil War to now, specifically regarding housing, the banking and infrastructure and finance laws relating to that housing, the commerce and how everything relates to that, both in cities and communities and all that kind of stuff. Like, it goes down to like even home ownership programs. There were more home ownership programs and incentives and plans to help out white people than to help out black people. And it's just like, it's just crazy. And I told my girlfriend, I don't want to be that white guy, championing about how white people destroyed black people's future. Because that's not true. We didn't. I didn't. My people didn't. It's a touchy thing, and it's obviously something that I'm figuring out how to appropriately talk about it. But the fact is, and as he said in the book, he doesn't agree with the term reparations. But let's see, he doesn't agree with reparations, but he says that where is it? Oh, not reparations, remedies. There have been certain actions that over time have led to a certain state, and there shouldn't be a lump sum payment like the lump sum payment for the economic stimulus for COVID. That's not going to really do anything. Yes, people need $1,400, they need $1,600, they need $2,000, but as a long-term solution, that does nothing to solve the problem. If it would be even better if it was like $500 over 4 months. Give people a little bit of planning and not just, oh, here's one lump sum payment and I don't know when the next thing is going to come. Just like how with this situation, reparations for all black people or African American people aren't going to just solve the problem of the racial inequality and equity and all that kind of stuff that we have. We had affirmative action and that attempted to fix some of the racial and ethnic disparities in colleges. But that's not been 100% positive either. There's been people that should have gotten college that didn't, people that didn't deserve to go in college that got put in there. And it's all just like a quota. It's all just like a quota system. Like, why should everything be based off this racial color of your skin type thing? Like, yes, it's been something that's affected people's lives on a daily basis. It's, going back to slaves and Civil War and all that kind of stuff. If your great-great-grandfather was a slave, how do you think that would make you feel about today's society and what your life is and all that kind of stuff? Like, if you're not even great-great-grandfather, what if your grandfather or your father or your mother or your sister, whatever, sister's mother, whatever it was persecuted, was round up by a gang of criminals or a gang of people and hung? Like, the shit just blows my mind. And it's like, I'm here to change it. Like, it's come the time where it's no longer just, like, it's, if you become educated and know about your country, you know, it's here. I'll read a couple quotes from the back of it, and I mean, because I'll go through all the individual notes, all the more details in a future video. You know, it goes through the different print agreements, private agreements, and just the government enforcement of those agreements. White flight, about blockbusting and the contract rules, and how the Federal Housing Authority basically like controlled all these different housing options, and how that leads to now, and the IRS, how they could have done things, other government agencies. There's so many details involved in this. And as you can tell, we've gone over the 5-minute book review. But I'll just go through some of the, like, from start to finish. I'm going to edit this video and try to condense it down. But at this point, I'm enjoying this. I hope you're enjoying this. You know, you get raw, unfiltered Joe Peluso thoughts. And after reading this book the entire day today and thinking about how I was going to do this and talk about it and all that kind of stuff, like, I can't just talk about it. I need to do this presentation and all that kind of stuff. So that's a future video. Hopefully working, tandem with someone else who's good at map making, Johnny Harris. We'll see. Probably not work with him. I'll learn myself. I need to learn map making and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going through the book, and I'm going to read a couple of them. And so one of the things he references a couple times in a couple different quotes is that while yes, it's a certain perspective to say, oh, I did not do that, I don't have to worry about that, or I shouldn't have to worry about that, or I shouldn't have to do anything about that. That's a certain perspective, and I respect your opinion just like I respect all opinions. But that's not to say your opinion's right or wrong, or my opinion's right or wrong. But I don't think if you believe that everything that happened in the past you're not responsible for, or you don't have to be aware of or do anything about, you're not entering into this social contract of what it means to be a citizen in the United States. Like, there are certain things that you should do to be a part of this country, to be a part of society, to do all this kind of stuff, to have all the benefits. So, it's just part of it. So, first quote, "Let bygones be bygones," is not a legitimate approach if we wish to call ourselves a constitutional democracy. It's just not valid anymore. We means all of us, the American community. As a citizen in this democracy, we, all of us, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, and others, bear a collective responsibility to enforce our Constitution and to rectify past violations whose effects endure. The core argument of this book is that African Americans were unconstitutionally denied the means and the right to integration in middle-class neighborhoods, and because this denial was state-sponsored, the nation is obligated to remedy it. Yeah, so basically he's putting out there that because of different state agencies and the actions that were involved in state and federal agencies and the IRS and presidents and all those different actions combined, because of those actions, we're at this point. Because we're at this point, and because we're part of a democracy where we all have constitutional rights and all equal and all that good stuff, which if you read the Bill of Rights is there, we have some responsibility as a whole to this country. Agree? As American citizens, whatever routes we or our particular ancestors took to get to this point, we're all in this together now. So that's basically what he's putting, So this, and he said, and basically he goes through, that's the Negro, Black, African American, colored, the different terms of how he talks about them. And he says, this shifting of terminology should not distract us from this underlying truth. We have created a caste system in our country, with African Americans kept exploited and geographically separate by racially explicit government policies. Although most of these policies are now off the books, they have never been remedied, and their effects endure. And just really, if you don't believe me, that's okay. I respect your, like I said. But I implore you to look at the numbers, to read this or to read anything online, and to look at the numbers and just think about what it would mean if there's. So here's an action. In 1950, you say black people go live over here, and then white people go live over here. Okay, so white people are here, black people are here, because of other policies and all that kind of stuff. Rent's higher here, rent's lower here. There's more other income for maintenance here. There's less here, less maintenance income here, more money for maintenance here. Different policies in place, worse policies in place, all that kind of stuff. So now advance it 50 years from now. This community only appreciated double what the house was cost originally. It cost 50 grand to begin with. Now it's 100 grand. Cool. So if one of those people had passed down that down to their ancestor, they passed down $100,000 in equity to their children. But the white family, let's say it was 50 grand to start with, but it appreciated 5 times. So it's 250 grand, and they passed that down to their kids. 250 grand compared to 100 grand, just because of where they were stated that they had to live. Like, you come back from World War II as a veteran, like the VA told you, you go live here, or you go live here based on the color of your skin. That it just freaking blows my mind that like we've had government agencies and government policies and practices that told that were explicit about that. Like, and it's not just the government; it's also in neighborhood housing policies and neighborhoods were literally constructed with the explicit requirement to not have any black people or any African American people there, or have a quota, or have only a small percentage. Like, it just, and like I said, you only learn what you read and what you know and what you talk about. If you don't read, if you don't know this past, because our government and the school books that our government provides don't include this, which he includes in here, then you never know. Like, if you don't go back and read it and research, you're not going to know the history of the town that you live in, or the city that you live in, and the policies that have enabled that neighborhood to be where it's at, or that other neighborhood to be where it's at. You look on the map and you just see all these neighborhoods and groupings and like cities and where everything is, and you're just like, oh, that's what it is. Unless you think. So think. Okay. Going through for some quotes. Okay, so one of the examples of housing authority, the policy that they said was a policy of segregation was adopted, explained the authorities director, for the purpose of, quote unquote, keeping social harmony or balance in the whole community. And that's what, as he goes through, basically says that a lot of these policies, a lot of these different laws were basically meant to keep the status quo. Like, and you know, you could see a certain benefit to that, but at the same time, if and as it's you know laid out in this book, if the status quo is in direct violation to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which literally say that you cannot discriminate based on the color of someone's skin, and if that's the status quo that the community is doing, then it's the federal government's responsibility to tell that state and local, hey, cut that shit out. You can't do that. That's literally what it means to be a part of the United States of America, to enter into the social contract of that United States of America and follow along with what the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and other laws say. And that's the facts. You go back and you look at it, and that, I mean, and so while it might not explicitly be happening now, there are policies and effects from it that are still happening. And there are certain policies still in effect that haven't been challenged, or, you know, it's just like... Okay, so I'm going to skip to the end and go through some of the ones he says near the end and read the epilogue. Okay, so here's just a couple of the parts that he answered in the frequently asked questions, and then I'm going to read the final epilogue just to wrap it up. So, if we excuse past leaders for rejecting non-discrimination standards that were held by some, we undermine our constitutional system. The Bill of Rights and the Civil War amendments exist to protect minorities and individuals from majority opinion, not from unanimous opinion. No matter how conventional their racial policies were, the racial policies were, they violated African American constitutional rights. The consequences define our racially separate living arrangements to this day, so it is up to our generation to remedy them, whether or not we fault particular historical figures. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the details in terms of, oh, who did this, or what percentage there, like, how it all affected, I mean, that's undefinable, or indeterminate, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not saying we only need to focus on moot policies moving forward, but remedies, like he mentioned, might be the best solution here. Not reparations, remedies. When we become Americans, we accept not only citizenship privileges that we did not earn, but also its responsibilities to correct wrongs that we did not commit. It was our government that segregated African neighborhoods. Whether we or our ancestors bore witness to it, whether or not we or our ancestors bore witness to it, and it is our government that we must now craft remedies. I think that was a misspeak, but I prefer the term remedies to reparations. To my ear, and it may only be mine, reparations sounds more like a generalized one-time payment to African Americans for their exploitation, instead of an actual fix to the problem. So let's improve. Let's get better. Let's fix the problem. Let's not just slap a bunch of money on it. So here's the last part of the video. So just gonna be a page and a half. Read it through, and then I'll end it off. In the 20th century, federal, state, and local officials did not resist majority opinion with regard to race. Instead, they endorsed and reinforced it actively and aggressively. If government had declined to build racially separate public housing in cities where segregation hadn't previously taken root, and instead had scattered integrated developments throughout the community, those cities might have developed in a less racially toxic fashion, with fewer desperate ghettos and more diverse suburbs. Basically, there were some cities that didn't have any racial segregation, and they literally were just like, oh, okay, so because these cities have racial segregation, you must apply those same policies to your city, even though there was no racial segregation, just because, like, different cities, different locations geographically, different factors, all that kind of stuff. Next, if the federal government had not urged suburbs to adopt exclusionary zoning laws, white flight would have been minimized because there would have been fewer racially exclusive suburbs to which frightened homeowners could flee. Basically, they started zoning and just like, hey, this is a white area, black area, lower income white area, lower income black area, higher income. And when certain people started moving in because of certain percentages and all that kind of stuff, white flight was a real thing. Oh shit, there's a black person moving in. I gotta move. And it was perpetuated by the housing authority, by the brokerage, and like the real estate market. Like, there was really intentional shit that people did to spur on this white flight. That's what blockbusting is, basically just breaking up huge blocks of different houses to sell under this ruse of all this shit. If the government had told developers that they could have FHA guarantees only if homes they built were open to all, integrated working class suburbs would have likely matured with both African Americans and whites sharing the benefits. Basically, the Federal Housing Authority literally said that there could only be non-whites. Only white areas or non-white, and it's just like, that's crazy. It's crazy. If state courts had not blessed private discrimination by ordering the eviction of African American homeowners in neighborhoods where association rules and restrictive covenants barred the residents, middle-class African Americans would have been able gradually to integrate previously white communities as they developed the financial means to do so. Yeah, literally, there were certain communities, HOA associations, whatever you want to call it, that were literally like, oh, we're not going to have any black people here. And they just voted, and they required that every single person who moved into those communities to sign this legal requirement, all that kind of stuff, to say that they're not going to, sell to black people. It doesn't surprise me, but it's just crazy to read specific examples and to go back through history, because that's what you do when you read. You go back through history and you learn and you experience, and if you try to put yourself in that person's perspective or a general person's perspective, you'll learn. So if state courts had not blessed, if churches, universities, and hospitals had faced loss of tax-exempt status for their promotion of restrictive covenants, they most likely would have refrained from such activity. Okay, yeah, churches, universities, hospitals, they have tax-exempt status, okay? And that's a great thing for them in certain situations. And technically, in my opinion, they shouldn't have tax-exempt status. But one of the main arguments in this book, too, is that they helped promote this discriminatory nature. Like religion, something that says that all men are equal in God's eyes, yet somehow, only white people were accepted at certain churches, or churches donated to certain people that only built white houses. Or if police had arrested rather than encouraged leaders of mob violence when African Americans moved into previously white neighborhoods, racial transitions would have been smoother. And this, it doesn't come down to individual cops. It comes down to the cops' boss and their boss and their boss. Because, if a cop does something that the boss doesn't approve with, they're gonna fire him. But if the cop does something that the bosses do approve with, then it's just gonna continue continue. And that's what happened. You know, not saying that individual cops needed to stand up. They're doing a job just like anyone else. But it is individuals, and it is a collection of individuals that makes up society. And just some of the examples, and, you know, like I barely know anything about this history yet compared to the whole. And I have so much more to learn. And just the examples that I do know about the violence that has happened, the lynchings, just the intimidation, like bricks thrown through windows, the KKK, like the fact that I live next to Stone Mountain and that's the second home of the KKK. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, so if real estate commissions had denied licenses to brokers who claimed an ethical obligation to impose segregation, those brokers might have guided the evolution of interracial neighborhoods. Yeah, I mean, real estate brokers literally helped this path along. They were just like, okay, well, I mean, for them, it's not a. They were economically driven, just like a lot of aspects of this book are all economically driven. People just want the bottom dollar, and for the real estate broker then, they knew that certain, like if a white person was selling to a black family, the black family would pay more because there was such a lack of housing available that they could charge more, and they would know the black family would pay it. I mean, they're just profiting, but it's not their fault. And it's like, but it's, yeah, so it's, you can't pass the blame game. You can't do the blame game all the time, but it's definitely collectively shared by the individuals who are no longer alive and by the individuals who are still alive and the government in which those individuals worked and the laws in which allowed them to do what they did. If school boards had not placed schools and drawn attendance boundaries to ensure the separation of black and white pupils, families might not have had to relocate to have access to education for their children. Literally, school systems, based on all these other laws and zoning and all that political pressure and all that kind of stuff, put schools in certain areas based on the populations in that area, based on race. Which, you know, come on, we're past it. We're not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to talk to anyone, or I'm going to talk with them, but I'm not going to accept their justification rationale for why we should have, you know, exact policies based on race. I legitimately think the census should not even have race on it at all. We need to understand race and understand how policies influence that, but moving forward, race shouldn't define anything. Like, we need to figure out how to remedy issues from the past and make sure that they're not issues moving forward. But we need to move past, like, definitions of who you are based on the color of your skin or where you're from or anything like that. Like, I might just call me globalistic, whatever, but that's the fact to me. Okay. If federal and state highway planners had not used urban interstates to demolish African American neighborhoods and force the residents deeper into urban ghettos, black impoverishment would have lessened, and some displaced families might have accumulated the resources to improve their housing and its location. Look at the numbers, the Interstate Highway Act, and the people that were responsible for it. Definitely on a statistical impossible percentage chose African American communities and homes and the slums and ghettos that were there to demolish and build the highways there. And, you know, that's understandable in some perspective. Like, okay, it's not that great. Let's improve it, get rid of it, and build something new. And there are ways in which that could have been done appropriately, but it wasn't. If government had given African Americans the same labor market rights that other citizens enjoyed, African American working class families would not have been trapped in lower income minority communities from lack of funds to live elsewhere. If the federal government had not exploited the racial boundaries it had created in metropolitan areas by spending billions on tax breaks for single-family suburban homeowners, while failing to spend adequate funds on transportation networks that could bring African jobs to job opportunities, the inequality on which segregation feeds would have diminished. It just keeps going. There's more policies, whether or not they have to drive, a larger distance. And it's not everything needs to be equal in the world, but read the book. If federal programs were not, even to this day, reinforcing racial isolation by disproportionately directing low-income African Americans who received housing assistance into the segregated neighborhoods that government had previously established, we might see many more inclusive communities. Basically, this is the existing stuff that's currently still going on. There's multiple policies, and I need to get more details and before I even talk about them, but it's still going on, and the effects of the other things which aren't going on are still present, and that's how it's all going on. It's all being mixed and churned still, and it's, like I said, remedies. We need remedies, or we're never going to be able to just get over it, and improve from it, and be at peace as a country. Undoing the effects of de jure segregation will be incomparably difficult. To make a start, we will first have to contemplate what we have collectively done, and on behalf of our government, accept responsibility. So, it wasn't you, it wasn't you. It wasn't me. It wasn't, just, like, it wasn't a specific ancestor. It wasn't your specific ancestor. It's been a collective action over time, and I'm just one guy. I don't know the exact solution, but I know that education is a huge, huge, huge part of it, and not just any education, an adequate and equal and an exemplary education, something that shows information and facts from both sides, or from all sides, or from the scientific side, or from the non-religious side. Sure, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. As long as all options are presented and given, and there is a factual procedure and logic that's the foundation for education and learning and all that kind of stuff, you can make up your own mind about what the facts are. If you don't believe the world is a round circle, or you don't believe the world is a globe and you think the world is flat, sure, I don't know. Just don't. I don't know. I mean, if you go and be a policymaker and you try to make it so that it's prescribed on the dollar bill that the Earth is flat, there are going to be some people that disagree with you, and you're not going to do it, and that's going to be a democratic process that's be like, oh, no, the world is not flat. Let's vote on it and move on. But either way, Richard Rothstein, Color of Law, highly, 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 highly recommend it. I will talk about this, think about this anytime with any single person. This will guide a lot of my decisions and perspective and goals in terms of how I get to know Atlanta more. I've been here my entire life, but I only know a portion of the city, a very small portion. So that's going to be part of the process, getting to know it, getting to know District 2, figuring out how all these different zoning laws and history have led to now. Gotten a little look at it with this book, and I couldn't recommend it more. And that's it. It's been a interesting year so far, and this was my challenge to read in week 1, and so it is definitely not week 1, but now I get to read the second book, which I'm extremely excited for. Hopefully I can catch up and read that in a couple days. Yeah, really. Thank you for watching. Thank you for improving with Joe. Read it, Color of Law. Comment, subscribe, like. Let me know your thoughts. If you have read it, let me know. Really, people, there's so much information out there, so much to learn and understand. And not saying that every single person has to have all this information in their head all the time, but some understanding and the education that we give to our children, our society, and the people that will come after us is incredibly important. And maybe I'll make it my challenge this year to get in contact with people who run these books, who publish these books, and make it a thing that we need to demand there would be more information, more, you know what I'm talking about. See you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for improving. Please like, subscribe, share, get the message out there, get my word out there, get my perspective out there, because it's going to help. It's going to change the world, and you're going to be a part of it. So thank you for improving with Joe, and I'll see you in the next one.